So let's start with section A and inspector calls. You will get a choice of 2 questions. You have to pick one, and those questions could ask you about either character or theme in the play. So we're going to look at an example where we attempt to answer a question on age. I want you to start by mind mapping any ideas about age that you think are explored in the play. So some of the ideas that you might have written down are ideas such as Priestley explores the idea that the older generation are traditionalists who are unwilling to change and accept responsibility. To juxtapose this, the younger generation are progressives who show a willingness to accept responsibility and change. And ultimately, Priestley wants to show us that hope for social change lies in the hands of the younger generation. One way that you could start your response is by outlining the key ideas that you will be exploring in your response. Whichever ideas you explore in your introduction or your thesis statement are ultimately ideas that you think that you can evidence later on. So I want you to just spend a couple of minutes writing a little introduction to your essay, outlining the ideas that you think you are being explored in the play about age. So to give you an example, a thesis statement might look something like this. In an Inspector Calls, Priestley presents a contrast between the older and younger generation. The younger generation, characterised through Sheila and Eric, are shown to accept responsibility and begin to make a socialist change, whereas the older generation, characterised through Mr. and Mrs. Burling, fail to accept responsibility and embrace change. Perhaps Priestley aims to show that if society was to change, it would be the younger generation that would drive it. As I said, any ideas that you explore in your thesis statement, you need to make sure that you can evidence those in the main body of the essay. So I now want you, from memory, to write down any quotations that you think you could use to support the following ideas. So evidence of the younger generation being progressives, accepting responsibility and embracing change, and then evidence of the older generation failing to accept responsibility and embrace change. Perhaps some evidence that we could use. So evidence of the younger generation being progressives, accepting responsibility and embracing change is when Sheila says they're not cheap labour, they're people. And Eric says, why shouldn't they try for higher wages? We try for the highest possible prices. To juxtapose this, evidence of the older generation failing to accept responsibility and embrace change, seen through when Eric challenges his parents about their inability to accept responsibility. He says, you're beginning to pretend now that nothing's really happened at all, and I can't see it that way. And he also says, whoever that chap was, the fact remains I did what I did. Both of which in response to the fact that his parents take no responsibility for the part that they played in Eva Smith's death. The next stage will be to think about what we're going to say about that evidence. So that's our AO2, identifying writers' methods and analysing how writers' methods help support our overall idea. So I want you now to take some of that key evidence that we've selected. I want you to underline any key words, identify any writers' methods in that evidence, define the underlined words, write any connotations of those underlined words and what the quotation helps to show us about age in the play. As an example, if we looked at the evidence to support the idea that the younger generation are willing to change, we have this quotation from Sheila, they're not cheap labour, they're people. We could talk about how we've got the repetition of there, which helps to emphasise the divisions within society because Sheila isn't able to name any of these people, so it helps to show that she doesn't know any of them personally. However, despite not knowing any of them personally, she empathises with them, and this is shown by the fact that she refers to them as not cheap labour but people, which helps to show that she values people over profit, which goes against typical capitalist views of the time. Perhaps Priestley did this to foreshadow Sheila and the younger generation's capability for a socialist change. So a second quotation we could use to support the idea that the younger generation are capable of change is when Eric says, why shouldn't they try for higher wages? We try for the highest possible prices. This question shows Eric rejecting the traditional capitalist view of profit over people. His use of the words higher and highest suggests that even if they were given a higher wage, there is still some inequality between workers' pay and the profit made, which ultimately shows that Eric has an understanding that the workers do not earn a livable wage. And this is probably something that he became aware of through his relationship with Eva. So to give you an example of what one of those quotation explosions might look like as part of a paragraph for a longer response. In an In Spectacles, Priestley presents the juxtaposition between the older and younger generation. He presents the younger generation as progressives who are willing to accept responsibility and change, shown through the characterisation of Eric and Sheila. This can be seen when Eric says, "Why shouldn't they try for higher wages? We try for the highest possible prices." This question helps foreshadow Eric's later rejection of capitalist views, as here he seems to value people over profit. The words higher and highest suggest his understanding that even if the workers were paid a higher wage, there would still be some inequality between wages paid and the profit made. This shows Eric's understanding of the fact that the workers don't earn a livable wage. He likely became aware of this through his relationship with Eva Smith. On to section B, which is power and conflict poetry. You will get one question. So unlike in Spectacles where you get a choice of two, you just get one question here. There is no choice. You're expected to compare two poems. The question will name one poem and you must write about this poem. The named poem will be printed on the exam paper, but you will need to select a poem with linked ideas to compare to the named poem. You must know some from quotations from this poem from memory, and you will have 45 minutes to answer this question. So to give you an example of what this would look like, compare how poets present ideas about power and control in London and one other poem. So the named poem here is London. The theme you are being asked to explore is the ideas about power and control. I just want you to spend some time making notes for the following. Which poems could you pick to compare with London? Bullet point 3 ideas that link the two poems you would compare together. And select 3 quotations from London that you could use to support these ideas. And try and recall 3 quotations from your comparison poem to support these ideas. There are, of course, a variety of poems that you could pick to compare with London that explore power and control. To give you an example, one such poem could be London and My Last Duchess. 3 ideas that you could explore. Both poems explore the power of those with wealth and status. Both poems explore abuse of power. Both poems explore how power is used to control. Once you have decided on the 3 ideas that link the poems, you would then think about what evidence you could use to support these points. So just spend a few minutes writing down 3 quotations from London that support the points, the linked ideas from the previous slide, and 3 quotations from My Last Duchess that would also support the previous points. Again, some examples, though there are multiple quotations that could be used. In London, we could use the quotations, "I wander through each chartered street near where the chartered Thames does flow. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls, and the mind-forged manacles I hear." In My Last Duchess, we could say, "As if she ranked my gift of 900 years old name with anyone's gift. I gave commands, then all smiles stopped. And since none puts by the curtain I have drawn from you but I." Like with An Inspector Calls, you want to think about how you would go about exploding those quotations. So start by underlining key words, identifying any writer's methods in the quotation, defining the underlined words, writing connotations of underlined words, and then thinking about how the quotation, or what does the quotation show us about power in the poems. Let's give you some questions that might sort of support or prompt your analysis. We're exploring the idea that both poems explored the power of those with wealth and status. In My Last Duchess, we could use a quotation as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name of anyone's gift. We could start by thinking about how the Duke treats his Duchess. Why might he consider her getting his name as a gift? What does the status attached to his name allow him to do? How does he believe the Duchess should respond to getting his name? And what does with anyone's gift suggest about how she viewed getting his name? Similarly, in London, I wander for each chartered street near where the chartered Thameses flow. Chartered suggests something is owned or controlled. Why does Blake repeat the word chartered, and what does this suggest about London? And how might the words flow and wander contrast with chartered? So what could we say about them? Well, in My Last Duchess, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name of anyone's gift, we've got this method of the personal pronoun of my. The Duke assumes complete control over his wife through his name. He considers his name a gift which should be treasured. He feels that it gives him the right to do what he wants. The age of his name suggests the length of time it's held power. It's more powerful for having been around for 900 years. The comparison of his gift to anyone's gift suggests his belief in his own power and how it must be obeyed, and almost as if he didn't feel that the Duchess was grateful enough for the gift of his name that he gave, because she saw it as the same as any gift that she was given. In I wander through each chartered street, I wander through each chartered street near where the chartered Thames does flow. In London, we've got this repetition of that word chartered, which indicates that the river is owned by man. Even nature is being oppressed by the power of man. The use of the verbs wandered and flow suggests a freedom of movement that contrasts with the control of men. So Thames and the streets are owned by men. There is nothing left that hasn't been tainted. So perhaps we've got that contrast to show that Blake believed that everyone should be free, but actually to help emphasise the fact that London was under heavy control. If you were going to turn this into a paragraph, you might follow this structure. So use the time and this structure to help write a comparison paragraph using the quotation that I just helped to explode on the last slide. So you start by outlining the 3 comparative ideas that you explore, which can be found on an earlier slide, and then you go into idea number 1. So in both poems, so insert poem 1 and then poem 2, the writers explore the ideas that power is, and then you outline your first idea. Explore how the first idea is explored in both poems, providing evidence to support your points. So for example, you could say in, and then your first poem, the poet explores the idea, insert the idea again, through, and this is where you put in your evidence. The writer's use of, you insert your method, implies or shows, and that's where you go into your analysis of that evidence. Perhaps through this, and then you insert the name of the writer is trying to show us, and then you think about why the writer might be writing the poem, what message they're trying to send. At this point, you then make a link to the second poem, so you could use words like similarly, this is similar to, however, and then in your second poem, the poet explores the idea through, you insert your evidence, the writer's use of, where you insert your method, implies or shows, and then you insert your detailed analysis. And again, then making links to why the writer has written the poem, what overall message they're trying to send. If you have time, because you only have 45 minutes, aim to write about 3 ideas, so 3 comparisons between the 2 poems, but I would much rather you write about 2 ideas in depth than 3 in a shallow way. Finally is section C, which is unseen poetry and unseen poetry comparison. This section contains 2 questions. Question 1, where you have to write a response to an unseen poem, and question 2, where you compare the poem from question 1 with a poem in question 2. Question 1 is worth 24 marks and you could spend around 35 minutes on this. You must write a focused personal response that includes evidence from the poem and analysis of the writer's methods in that quotation. Question 2 is only worth 8 marks. You should spend about 10 minutes on this question. You must compare the methods that the writer used to communicate their ideas. So to give you an example, this is a past paper. So this is on the left-hand side, you've got question 1. So you get this short poem. In To a Daughter Leaving Home, how does the poet present the speaker's feelings about his daughter? Then section B, you then get a second poem that's on a linked theme. So in both Poem from My Sister and To a Daughter Leaving Home, the speaker describes feelings about watching someone they love grow up. What are the similarities or differences between the ways the poets present those feelings? To walk you through question 1, To a Daughter Leaving Home, how does the poet present the speaker's feelings about her daughter? You could start by listing 3 ideas that you could explore which relate to the speaker's feelings about their daughter, and then thinking about which quotations you might use to support these ideas. You want to identify methods and be ready to analyse and explain why. And then once you've written your response to question 1, you then come to question 2 and you can reuse some of the ideas that you've written for question 1, but this time you're making a comparison. So you might start to write down what the speaker's feelings about their sister growing up in this poem. Again, you might pick a quotation to support that idea, identify the method and explain how it supports the idea, and then think about are the feelings and methods used similar or different and explain why. And that's when you would construct your idea. So focus on the first poem, the idea and the method used, and then making a comparison, whether it's similarity or difference, to the second poem.